Now, I did say in my last video that we'd move on to the standard section sheet, but actually I don't think we need to at this point because the data, the columns are all the same on this sheet as the standard section sheet. So we'll move on to that a little bit later. Also, I feel it'd be good to dig a bit more into the X financials and to show you some more examples of how the standardization process works from this sheet. So that's what we're going to do.
So I want to have a look at a different company. I want to look at Microsoft, and as you can see, we're pulling through MSFT, the ticker from the codes section, and we can override the sections and dates that are set in the standard section here. So for example, I can put in the IS for the income statement and put latest year in 2020, and it will override those settings which are coming in from that other sheet, which is good because sometimes you want to sort of mess around with one company, so it just enables you to quickly do that. Now what I'm interested in doing is to actually, let's just run this query first. So Alt F5 will get the query running. As you can see, it's happening down here, and very shortly we will see the income statement for Microsoft. Now I want to sort of zero in on this standard column, and so we can see that a bit better. Let's just make it a bit bigger. Yeah, maybe not quite that big, but that'll do. And you will see that there are a series of tags and also some equal signs, and the equal signs basically are saying that the standard tag is the same as the tag that is disclosed by the company. So certainly in the case of gross profit, that makes complete sense. Gross profit is a standard value that you might want to compare across companies, and similarly we've also got operating income loss, which is basically operating profit in the US GAAP tagging system. So again, we have an equals, and some of them are not. So the first item in the income statement, the company has disclosed a very specific type of revenue, and that's going to be no use if we want to compare this company against other companies that don't use that specific tag. They use either their own specific tags, or they just disclose a total revenues figure, which is what's represented by this tag. So we want to be able to standardize up to that tag in order to make these comparisons. So that's exactly what our tagging system has done, which is great. Now probably to see this even more clearly, if we go to the X financials sheet over here, and you can see how our tagging system has achieved that. And yeah, the tags we're looking at here at the moment, they come from the balance sheet, BS up there. So if we want to look at a different part of our chart, we can just use the drop down, and let's go for the income statement, and again we can pull that back. It's basically a query. It's querying our chart, which is in the database. So if we click on Alt 5 again, it will give us the figures for the income statement. So we can see, well, not quite right at the top, but the second tag is exactly the one that Microsoft has disclosed, and then you'll see some other familiar sort of types of revenue. These are all standard US GAAP tags that a company might use, and we've organized them so they add up to sales revenue, and then you combine that or that total, which is obviously all these things added up, with financial services revenue. You will get to revenues, which is obviously how we have standardized this particular tag from Microsoft. And where we've got common standard tags that we want to maybe see on a regular basis, we've also added a little mnemonic to make them easier to pick, and we'll probably do more with that as time moves on. And in order to see these relationships, you can look at the standard ID, because basically the relationships are encapsulated in these numbers. So if you look very carefully, you may see that the revenues tag has 1 digit less than the sales revenue tag, for example. And in fact, if we just look at the last 2 digits, basically that has as a 7, and essentially sales revenue is 77 and financial revenue is 75, indicating that they are both members of this particular group. And if you want to visualize that, we've also sort of set out the different levels. So if you come across here, you see at level 7 sort of going up the pyramid, as it were. You've got revenues, and then that's made up of sales revenue, financial services revenue, and then as you go further down, you'll see that sales revenue is then made up of all these different things. So it doesn't matter what a company discloses, so they might disclose just oil and gas revenue, they might disclose at this level, so they just disclose sales revenue or financial services revenue. We'll pick that up, and we will standardize that up to the level of revenues. And we kind of stop there as the chart works, as it were, and the system, as it were, knows that's the case by this column here called is top. It tells it that you don't want to go beyond revenues in terms of standardizing it. You don't want to then classify revenues, for example, as operating profit or profit before tax, etc., etc., etc. And in general, an is top will also, well, every is top will also have a mnemonic, but there also are some other sort of common sort of items floating around with mnemonics. So that's kind of how it all works. I'll just come back here and just also mention what we call unclassifieds. So here we've got revenues, and it's made up of these three items: sales revenue, financial revenues, and then we've got an item called unclassified revenues, or UNC revenues for short. And essentially every group, every subtotal, as it were, has an unclassified bucket, and that will basically contain anything which is other than these items or cannot be classified. And so if there are any tags which specifically are defined as other income, so this is a US GAAP tag called other income, they will also be classified as being part of unclassified revenues. A lot of unclassifieds in there. Yeah, that's how they work. And as you can see, that, as I said, they operate at all levels. So we've also got one at the sales revenue level, so we've got unclassified sales, and you can see there's one item in there, but it may well turn out that there's more items that have actually been disclosed by a company, and they will all be represented by this figure if you were to sort of do the maths and add up the figures. So this is kind of, as you can see, very much at the far end of the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid. It goes down as far as 11 levels on the income statements. There's less on the balance sheet, probably, understandably. So yeah, as you go further and further up the pyramid, you obviously get to higher and higher, more and more standardized numbers. I'm just scrolling down so you can see things like operating income loss is a level even higher than total revenues. So hopefully that kind of makes all sense, and that then gets translated when you bring a company back in its standard form. Let's just make sure we're on the right section. To these tags here. So that's why we've got some extra standard ones. So you can see, for example, that we've got net income loss here, but if we want to sort of extrapolate that to the highest possible level at which it's still a comparable number, then we come up with this tag here, net income loss, available to common stockholders. So that's how the tagging works. And so now with this extra level of tagging, it's possible to do much more meaningful comparisons using XBRL.